One of my New Year's resolutions in 2021 was to get over my phobia of loud environments and make some connections. Unfortunately, the world is very noisy, and I used to quarantine myself all the time. Even before we had to quarantine for the other reason, I had another health issue that required quarantine, social anxiety, right? And so in 2021, as we were starting to reopen, I remember thinking this is my once in a lifetime opportunity, because never again are we going to have a situation where you can go out when it's not as crowded, practice that, and then graduate from 25% to 50% capacity. So I took up bowling, and I started going out to events a whole lot more. I started playing board games at a board game club. I'm very pleased that I did that, not just for the purposes of getting over loud environments, but for connections that I've made. You see, one of the darkest chapters in my life was back in 2019. I had met a girl and we had hit it big, and I knew she was waiting for me to propose to her, but I was scared to death. I didn't want to give up my life as a single guy. I really loved every year when I would travel to the Computer Olympiad conference. I really loved going on vacation to Gdansk Bay, Poland. I really loved going out to Ellensburg to go stargazing. I had no intention of giving any of that up, but I really felt this was a once-in-a-lifetime girl that I was getting to know. And so I was very lost in thought. Now the trouble is that I didn't have many connections outside of everybody that I knew from her, right? And I couldn't really confide with her friends. I confided with a former professor of mine from college, but he's many years my senior. He thinks marriage is a little bit old school, and he didn't really have much to say about it. He wasn't against it or anything, he just didn't have much to say about it. I confided in an old high school classmate of mine. He had gotten married in 2018, and he wasn't in the mood to talk about it, which I don't blame him. Nobody wants to talk about their recent marriage, and he has a lot on his plate probably at the time. It had only been a year since he had gotten married. Now, I have seasonal depression issues, and we just passed the winter solstice, which gives me a nice warm fuzzy feeling because at least the days are getting longer. But January is usually a very tough time in my year, in my life. And I was just thinking back in January 2020, I was so lost in thought that it would get proposing to the girl and not knowing this is my last January, and then all the seasonal depression issues that come along with it. That was one of the darkest months in my life, January of 2020. We still had loud environments. At least by March, I didn't have to deal with the loud environments anymore, and I obviously the weather was a whole lot better. I'd rather deal with not having toilet paper and the threat that we might catch something that would kill us instantly, right? At the time, it seemed like that, right? I'd rather deal with that than the uncertainties of the future, bad weather, loneliness, and all that, right? And so my goal in 2021 was to make sure I never run into that situation again, right? The next time I need somebody to confide in with something like that I would have somebody to confide in. And so I took up bowling, and I started, I used to hate going out to a restaurant to eat because I have to explain dietary restrictions, and I used to just hate social interactions like that. Especially because a lot of restaurants, they get it wrong, and then I have to excuse myself. But the last 2 years have taught me that we can't take social interactions for granted. And my experience before the pandemic taught me how important it is to invest in the social network before you need it, right? You'd rather have it and not need it than to need it and not have it, right? That's the lesson I learned from the situation, right? Not to mention, it would have been nice to have gone into the pandemic with some close friends as well, right? But it wasn't too late to make those connections. Anyway, going into 2022, I hope to invest further into my infrastructure, if you will, right? Building my social network back better, right? Thanks for watching.